store and several other locations. So basically what we did immediately after the cuts is we started working on pretty much a plan B. And this plan B was how we could restore some service to certain affected areas. And we know, given the fact that our budget's tight, and we're not going to be able to service everyone in the county, but we're going to do the best we can. And with that, I handed out a packet that's called Proposed System Enhancements. And I'll kind of just briefly go through that.
Is it passed out?
Yes, these were all passed out. Everybody should have one of those. And basically, you may not understand every aspect because you're not in the planning part of it every day, so I'll summarize it for you. We're looking at, the south end took a very big hit for service. We cut the Route 5 and the Route 8, and so essentially leaving those people without a way to get to work and get to school, and that also affected a lot of our paratransit clients as well. A lot of them with serious issues. The proposal we have would restore 72% of the service from the 5 and the 8. When we say 72% of the service, we're talking about the coverage on the road. The roads that we traveled before, we would restore 70%, 72% of that service with this 58. We've had a lot of service requests for the 58. The 58 services just north of Freeland, through Freeland, traveling on Goss Lake into Langley and to Skagit Head, which is another very big community that at one time had a lot of service. And so to take that service away, they obviously have had a lot of service requests. There's a map, proposed Route 58, and the red areas pretty much show, this is a condensed version, so the route won't look the same, and it'll combine those two routes together. The red areas still won't see service, and the reason for that is that was low ridership at the time, and we just couldn't justify 2 or 3 riders for the amount of miles that it would take to service those areas, and so we're trying to be more efficient. By using Goss Lake, we will give the folks on Saratoga Head there that did receive service before an opportunity to bring those folks inbounds to either catch the fixed route, or those para clients, they can bring them inbounds, and we'll look at some shelter locations on Goss Lake, and that would at least give them an opportunity to come closer without traveling all the way to Freeland Park, which is where some of them are being picked up at this time, traveling on to the senior center. So that's pretty much the 58. It's going to give Langley a little bit more service. It's going to give, like I said, the Skagit Head community more service as well. So moving up to Oak Harbor, we have a proposed Route 12. And with that packet, we've included a map, and it's got all field at the top of it, and it's got some red and blue on there. And if you see at the bottom of that map is Harbor Station, and there's a pathway on Pioneer and Regatta that's in black. This proposed route is going to combine the Route 10 and the Route 2. And what we feel that this route is going to do is it's going to be able to service more of the businesses, which we currently service on Oak Harbor. But it's going to give someone the opportunity to get everywhere they need to shop locally in Oak Harbor. Oak Harbor has a lot of redundant service, and so in being efficient, we're trying to look at ways that we can condense some of the service. As you see in black, that service, and by the base there, the seaplane base, will still go by there every single hour. But then when it gets up to the blue, it'll take that pathway for that half an hour back to Harbor Station. It'll travel back up the black again, and when it gets to the red, it will service that half of Oak Harbor. And that'll be every half an hour that we'll do that. We think by combining this, it has allowed us to pull some service hours in order to put those hours in other places that are needed. And again, keep in mind, this is done strictly within the current budget for 2015. So, our task was, can't cost us anything more. So we're looking at how we can be more efficient by doing that. The next route we've looked at is, in the map, is the Route 7, and the dark blue line shows you pretty much where the Route 7 travels now from the dock through Langley, via Langley Road, out Maxwellton, the highway, and Bayview. At one point, we used to go up to Freeland with the Route 7, and just recently we made that change. By putting in the 58, that'll allow us to possibly go back to Freeland. But in order to do that, what we've looked at is possibly cutting some midday service and by kind of moving it by a half an hour, so it would then go to an hour-and-a-half service for a short period of time throughout the middle of the day. And that service would then service Freeland and those places that people want to get to, and doctor's appointments and things like that. And then at commuter time, it would go back to its regular time, and it wouldn't make that trip. It would turn around in Bayview. And again, all of these are proposals, so we're bringing this up with you. Where they sit right now is they're currently with the operators. So they're the ones that are out there talking to these folks every day, to the riders and where they're going, and so we get that input from them. And then we take that input to the community meetings. We like to do the same thing with the Route 1, just no changes to the route. During the midday, we'd like to put it to hour-and-a-half service for a few of those runs. We have very limited ridership at that time, and then it would go back to its hourly service at commuter times. And we also have a plan to split the Route 7 and the 1 apart. We use the same bus. It's a big bus. The 1 gets to the dock, drops its folks off, turns into the Route 7, services Langley, Bayview, and Freeland, and then back the same route to the dock. If we split those routes apart, that'll give us the opportunity to put a smaller bus on Route 7, which would then be able to service a few more of our para clients, which right now, once you're in the guild, you can't deviate, you can't do anything but stay on the travel path. So those are some ideas that we're looking at. We've added the community meeting notices and the dates on there that we'll be out discussing this with the public and getting their input. And we really look forward to going back out there, because before they weren't really good meetings, because we're talking about cutting service. And so we look forward to going back out there and presenting these proposals and getting their input. Thank you.
I might say, add something here. When I was interim executive director, Sean came to me and said, we have an idea, our operations people have an idea to try and solve some problems that we created by curtailing service. And he said, I want your blessing to continue those meetings and to see if we can come up with some solutions that provide better service, with the caveat that, and I said, yeah, that it won't cost any more money because we just don't have it. And this is what his group has come up with, and a month or so ago, 2 months ago, I gave him the go-ahead to continue this because I can't tell you how complicated this is to do. It's unbelievable what happens when you want to move one little thing to improve service. It's just that it's terribly difficult. And we do have a policy that we do hold public meetings anytime we change service. That's the policy the transit system has, that the board dictated. And so we need to get this done. And our time frame, is the time frame still April? Is that?
Yes, so April 6th would be the rollout for this.
If we as a board think this is something we want to give our blessing to, then I would encourage you to do that. I think it solves some issues that we've had and certainly provides better service. That's what we should be doing for no more money. So that makes sense to me. April 1st, is that correct?
April 6th.
6th.
It's a Monday. It takes a minute for us to roll this type of deal out, so if there's a change or something that we want to do that's major, it generally would take us 3 months from the time that it's discussed, decided, do it. Because we have schedules involved that we have to get out to the public, so that's a reorder, reprint of schedules, and we've done that a couple of times this year already, along with putting the body of work together for the operators and giving them the proper time to adjust their schedules and putting all those bids together. So it just takes about 3 months, 90 days to do that.
Yes, a question for him. This appears to be a well thought out analysis of Oak Harbor and with the island proper. Are you doing the same thing with the routes off island going to Mount Vernon and Camino also?
Yes. So Camino experienced a significant cut. I don't have the number with me, but it was probably close to more than 50% of service that we cut. We still have a lot to gain over there, but we are looking at those routes as well. And the 411, that's the question of the day, and me and Mr. Grass could talk about it pretty much every day, because when we go to the first community meeting in Oak Harbor, the very first question that's going to come up is what's going to happen with the 411s, and we're kind of at the mercy of the legislature. We don't know what they're going to decide.
Could you just say where the 411 goes?
Yeah, so the 411 goes from Oak Harbor, Harbor Station, to March's Point, which is just there in Anacortes where the refinery, they have a park and ride there. And we used to travel over to Skagit Station in Mount Vernon, and we stopped doing that July 1 of last year, just due to the financial crisis. And so we're still traveling over there several times a day at SCAT's meeting, and SCAT has a vested interest on what we're gonna do as well. I mean, they created a 40X just to travel from March's Point to SCAT Station. So that's gonna be a big question of what we're gonna do. If we don't get the funding, are we prepared to do a limited service? Are we gonna scrap it? That's gonna be a big decision, and we'll be waiting for that instruction.
That was going to be my question to you, because this doesn't look like well thought out, and I like the idea that you're being able to make these adjustments here within the current budget constraints. I would really, and it pleased to know that you're working on it. I'd like to keep up to date on this, because that's I do know Camino took a huge hit, and some of the routes, these routes, this 411 especially, is pretty critical to people over there. And I would hope that we'd be able to, do the same kind of process as you've done here, work things out. Because I can tell you what people are going to tell me is, well, this looks, real good for the south end. What about us?
Yeah.
And they pay sales taxes as well. So I'd like to see some routes where we're going to be balancing it out and restoring some service over there.
If I were to think of the 411 as the Tri-County connector, is that correct?
Yes.
And that's not just service, not only from Oak Harbor to March's Point, but the commuter service from Camino to Mount Vernon, because that's part of it. That's funded by that same dollar amount, so that's in jeopardy also. Well, I know you did great deal of work on this, and I think this is a good step, and obviously it's something that should be undertaken all the time, evaluating our routes and where ridership is and where changes are. And the other thing you didn't mention was the fact this also affects our paratransit service, because the paratransit service pulses off of where our fixed routes are, and this changes the fixed route. So, and that was the idea, to try and catch more of the paratransit people that we know about. And so it's going to solve, well, it not solve a problem, but it will allow better coverage for paratransit also.
Does this board need to do anything official to instruct staff to go out and take these recommendations?
I think we ought to give an advisory vote and say, this looks great, go ahead and start, you know, we approve of this project, so you go.
That was going to be my question,
Yeah.
so we need a motion for to
I think that's
carry this
appropriate.
forward to public meeting.
Yeah, yeah. We haven't done it before, but I think it's appropriate to do it. So,
And your promotion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to authorize you to move forward with this to public meeting, public comment.
I second it.
Been moved and seconded to proceed with this proposed system enhancements as presented. Yes.
And then as another, sorry, so then it comes back to us in March, and then we take formal action in March for April adoption, or we don't?
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question, I was going to mention it anyway. After we compile the results of the public meetings, determine the levels or extent of the comments, and, kind of overlay those, if you will, over the proposed plan to see what's feasible, what's doable within the budget. We will come back probably at might be tight for the February meeting. Maybe we could try to come back by the February meeting to, well, maybe we'll have to, with whatever those proposed additions or changes are based on the public input for final plan, for board approval.
In February or in March?
It's going to have to be February if you're on an April schedule. Yeah.
And your last meeting is February 12th, so that would give you.
It's 2 weeks.
Everything's tight.
Well, can you do it?
I think you can.
Management.
We can present what we have in February, and if there were any further changes, we could, you know, present them in March before we roll out in April.
Okay.
That sound good?
Any further discussion?
Just think it's a great summary of what you've been working on, and I know it represents a great deal of work. And so I'm looking forward to the February action.
Anything else? All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Thank you both for all the hard work. Do you have anything else?
Yes, I do. Mr. Chairman, I've got two informational items I want to bring to the board's attention. Pretty much updates, but new information for the new board members. An ongoing issue over the last year and a half or so with the construction of this facility was the quality of the shop floor. In terms of its construction and later its use and durability over time. First of all, the overall I don't know, flooring, I guess, the final product, the overall flooring, was not of the type or the color that was originally specified. And there still seem to be unknown reasons as to why that occurred, but we and the contractor still have some similar, but some different ideas of what may have happened to not produce the quality of floor that was specified. So it's been an ongoing issue for about a year and a half. with no closure to it. And, but it's something that, that has to be addressed, it has to be resolved. And at this point, our resolution is for the contractor to make it right. However, at the same time, the floor began cracking. And my understanding is there was a crack here, a crack there in the beginning. But today, it's hundreds of cracks, many cracks in the floor of that structure. It's not established as to whether it's due to shrinking, whether it's due to something happening underground. They're starting out as miniature cracks in terms of width. Some are expanding a little bit. Nonetheless, there are cracks throughout the shop from end to end, everywhere. So before we do anything with the surface of the floor, we have to establish, ideally, what's causing the floor to crack. Secondly, how are we going to address the cracks before we put any new finish on the floor? I had a meeting with the contractor yesterday. Ken and I met with the contractor yesterday, and they seemed to think that they didn't know about the cracking issue, when in fact it had been happening for a year and a half, and it's just getting worse and worse by the day. So at this point, we've requested that they recruit their own concrete expert, if you will, to take a look at it, determine the cause of the cracking, whether it's long-term or just superficial, that it is something we could, that would be okay for us to go ahead and put new floor covering on, or if it's something more serious, below the depth of the concrete. That's the way we left it. They're going to come back with somebody to inspect it, inspect the cracks. I'm putting out feelers to see if we can get our own expert at hopefully no or very little cost to get our version of what's causing the cracks and the seriousness of them. But you know, it seems like this flooring issue is just not going to go away. And I know, Bob, you've been with this whole problem the whole way, and it seems to be getting worse than better. In the meantime, we have not signed off on this facility yet, due to that, and because of that, the contractor is required to withhold the payment to some of his subs because we haven't released the property yet. So we're continuing to address it and continue meeting on it, but we've got more than just the floor covering now that's an issue. That's about all I can say at this point. And certainly, if any of you, want to view the shop area, Ken would be glad to take you around and show you some of the cracking issues we're looking at. And I'm keeping Matt informed on the issue in case we get into some sort of legal forum down the road, but just going to keep at it until we get something. I don't know how long it's going to take. In the meantime, it's not impeding or distracting any work in the shop. Everything is still being serviced properly, it's not causing any safety hazards. Work is going on as usual in the shop, so it's not interfering with work. That's an informational item.
Question on that. I don't want to know the details, because I don't know the details, we don't have time for all that. But Bob did walk me through the shops, and I did when we spoke to cosmetic and the checking in there. And my question is, does anybody know if this was a structural slab in that there's rebar in the slab?
There is rebar.
There is a rebar grid, and it's still checking?
Yep.
Okay, that is pretty interesting.
Whereas the surrounding bus parking area is not rebar. The shop is, but the outside lot is not. We don't have any cracks in on the outside lot.
Just one question. In the past, the checking lines and so forth was presented primarily as a cosmetic question. Is there some way to determine whether it's cosmetic or structural?
Well, that's why we're gonna have, a third party come in and take a look at the cracking and to see if they could determine from the type of cracking that's occurring what it's caused by, or if it's just cracking that's not going to raise or lower the floor or move the floor, but maybe just superficial cracking, but we don't know. We just don't know.
Well, if I may, I know for a fact it was March of last year when this issue was brought up at a meeting, and the former director said at that time they were having core samples taken and tests being done on it, and I was just wondering if there's ever been any results from that. Was that passed?
Yes, there have been.
Because it was a bulging that the former director was talking about at that time.
Right. Ken, if you want to address the coring situation.
Yeah, so the cores came back, there was a bulging in one area of the floor which we were concerned about. They took the core sample, and I don't have all the numbers present, but basically there was too much air in the concrete at the time of the pour, which they believe is some of the cause of why the chemicals that they put on top for the sealer didn't set up correctly.
That's the appearance issue.
That was for
Yeah.
appearance.
And
Cracking.
then this cracking is
Subsequent.
another issue. Which doesn't look like it's an easy solution. Put astroturf over the whole place.
Second, I'll definitely keep you posted on that. The second item is the organization activities, the union organization activities that are occurring. Right now, the status is that the union, the local and the international, are reviewing the signatures of all the individuals that signed cards, that signed individual union cards to organize. They're comparing those names and signatures with our master employment sheet that we provided, giving the latest employee count of all the drivers and dispatchers involved in that organizing effort. So they're comparing the cards that came in with who presently is employed here. It's just another step in their process of validating and confirming the number of employees that would be in the unit. We won't, and once they confirm that it's more than 70% of the total employee base, then that will move into a second or another phase of more specific organizing activity. But right now, they're just verifying the employees that want to organize versus the total number of employees in those two departments. But it'll be a lengthy process and it'll go on for months.
I mean, haven't done any contractual negotiations, that's way downstream.
No, that's down the road. That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions of Ken? Okay. The next item is the chair's report, and since it hasn't been very long since our last meeting, and we have, seems like innumerable holidays stuck right in the middle of it, I don't have much to report. We did not have an RTPO meeting in between our times to report on. There will be another one in January. The chair, according to our organizational policy that we have here, the chair is responsible for supervising our interim director. And so I have been quietly supervising Ken, and we've had a few discussions. I do look at, he is basically on a paid on an hourly basis, and so I approve his submitted time card, I guess you want to call that, time sheet, and his expense reports. Every couple of weeks I look at those and initial those to make sure they're correct. So we do have oversight from the board on that particular matter. And other than that, Ken has taken over, and as I told him, I haven't had any phone calls late at night, so I'm assuming things are all right here. And I hear the bus go by early in the morning. Anybody have any questions? Is there any board discussion for this month?
I have something.
Okay.
If I may.
Absolutely.
And at this time, I would like to make a motion in the discussion section of this, and I'll pass these out for the other members. Is it written motion? Give you a chance to look at that. And some of these things, you know, I'm actually encouraged to hear that the staff has already jumped on some of these items that are particularly important to people who have talked to me in the community over a fairly long period of time. And so the motion that I would make here, after everybody has a copy of this, I move that the Transit Board place on the following topics on the March 27, 2015 board meeting agenda for discussion and possible action. And I believe that the March 27 is the correct date for our next, not the next meeting, the February meeting, but the March meeting.
No, it should be the 20th.
The 20th, excuse me. Change that then to March 20th on that motion. And